Our scripture this morning comes from Isaiah 43. We'll begin in the 15th verse. I am the Holy One, your God, Israel's Creator, your ruler. Thus says the Holy One, who made a road through the sea, a path in the mighty waters, who led chariots and warriors to their doom, a mighty army fallen, never to rise again, snuffed out and extinguished like a wick. Forget the events of the past. Ignore the things of long ago. Look, I am doing something new. Now it springs forth. Can't you see it? I'm making a road in the desert and setting rivers to flow in the wasteland. Ancient words from our tradition for our present day understanding.
This is how I knew y'all all had allergies, because Well, I find myself these days sometimes awake in the middle of the night, trying to think of something that might be helpful to you in this time of history. And I want to start by thanking the president, because he always does something that's a great visual aid to the pain and the degradation. The bombing of the airport in Iraq that killed the general, who's Iranian. And I understand it's a tough world, and there are times when things have to happen that are not tidy. I'm glad there are police. I'm glad there's military. At the same time, we find ourselves now having to take the word of a president who the Washington Post, I think, lost count of the number of lies. I mean, it was in the tens of thousands. Now, if you're one of those people that cares about things like truth, that bruises your heart. If you're one of those people that thinks that any honest presentation of history is an attack on the president, if you don't care whether the president lies, if it gets you power and gets you what you want politically, you may want to find a different church or just buckle in your seatbelt here. The president was at King Jesus, whatever his church. And it's that imperial colonialist Christianity that I think is the opposite of everything Jesus stood for. I do not belong to that church. I do not affirm that Christianity. And I think that's very important in these times, because the United States is still in the soft stages, but getting clearer every day of fascism, our version of fascism. The affection that people had for Franco of Spain, Mussolini of Italy, some other people you can probably think of, were to question the beloved leader is itself as an affront. And an honest presentation of simple facts is seen as disloyal to the country. We're going to have some decisions to make in the years ahead. I want to suggest that this is the time that the great religions were all born out of. I think Christianity was born at a time of great corruption and oppression. I think Judaism, Islam, every great nation in the world has been through this. If anything, times like this are the cradle out of which great wisdom and great humanity becomes necessary. So it's a very fearful time, but I also think it's a call to greatness. And I think the heart of the message is clearer in times like this than any other time. I did not understand until I was on trial for my ordination what some of these stories meant. Then you feel it, but you almost have to be in boiling water, either for you personally or to care about somebody else who's in harm's way, and to be willing to leave your comfortable place in this culture and to dissociate from the myth that there used to be a great America for everybody. Right? If you go back far enough, this was a really bad place for most people who lived here. So when people say they want to get back to America, exactly when are they talking about it? Before women could vote? Were those the great years while there was slavery? Is that what we're talking about? Because none of that stuff is that old. If faith means anything, it is choosing humanity in times like this. Choosing greatness in times like this. There are lots of religions and lots of churches where you can go and get distracted. I think more and more we need to find the hope, the joy, the peace that works at a time like this. I don't like the title. Originally I was thinking Gritty Hope. It's an 8-part series and it just kind of chokes as you say it. At the same time, it almost comes down to that. Right? What is the hope that is not escapist? What is the hope that is not in denial of the realities that we see and the dangers which we are approaching? When many, many Americans see people operating by the same principles we take for granted, we call them terrorists. If it's okay for the United States to assassinate someone in another land that we're not at war with, to assassinate them and say it's because they raped women and they killed Americans, committed war crimes. There's a lot of presidents that fall under that description. Would it be okay for you, for any of those countries, to bomb Washington to get at them? If somebody hated Al Capone and they bombed Chicago to get at them, would you feel that there's something amiss there? Something basic about humanity that's been lost? When I first heard the word terrorist, I knew we were in trouble because there's no definition for it. It's what scares us. When you say terrorist, I think some ethnic images come to mind, and that's on purpose. A couple of weeks ago, our president released people that the military said were war criminals. I don't know if this general was a bad person or a good person. I don't know. But the argument that he killed Americans is very strange. Because do you know of any generals who didn't kill somebody? You don't get to be a general if you don't kill anybody. That's what war is. And greatness, ethically, means being able to understand that just because somebody is on the other side of a boundary line, they're not fodder for us. Refugees are not illegal. And people who resist our colonization of their countries are not terrorists, by definition. You can probably figure this week on Facebook, I tried to just do some of the history of Iran. Just know the history before you sign off on this stuff. But to watch Americans run to war as though they're the ones going to be fighting. They're so brave to send 18, 19, 20-year-olds to go kill and die. I said this morning on Facebook, I wish there was some kind of a law where you couldn't support a war if you couldn't find that nation on the map. Right? How can you be in support of a nation if you know so little about it? that the only thing you know is they need to be bombed? How can you be in favor of assassinating somebody whose name you can't even pronounce? There's something very wrong in the soul of America. Something very wrong. And it calls for people like you and me to find our greatness, to help people out. Let me ask you this question. I'll ask you if you want to check out of the sermon, just fine. It's a thought experiment. If you knew that when you died, you could reincarnate into two different worlds, and one of the worlds would be a padded cell with every channel on the television set, every food you like. You'd be absolutely safe, but you'd never have an adventure in your whole life. Nothing would ever disturb you. Nothing would ever threaten you. Or another world that was in turmoil, that demanded of you greatness. A world of oppression where you had to teach justice. You had to embody it. A world of lies and propaganda where you had to teach and embody wisdom. A world that was so disturbing and frightening that you would be the one that had to teach and embody courage. Which of those two worlds would you choose to live in? Because that is the decision, that is the option that is before you today. Depth and spirituality or cultural religion. The kind of religion Karl Marx was talking about. You don't feel the pain. Is everybody okay? Breathe, breathe. So where is hope? Right? I think it's wedded to those virtues. The peace of mind comes after we've learned the virtue of courage. How can it be otherwise? In a nation that is so afraid of its shadow, so haunted by guilt of its atrocities, that we think building a wall is going to keep us safe. A wall to keep refugees out. That's our courage. We're listening to a passage today, and whenever you take up Scripture, it's very important to keep your mind and your heart intact, because it's always good and bad mixed together. I don't believe in a God who likes Christians and doesn't like atheists. I don't believe in that God. I believe that the church that exploits and supports and judges is the Antichrist that Jesus was talking about. Somebody that looks like Jesus and leads people astray. I believe this passage that acts like God likes Israel but doesn't like Egypt is a bad mistake. Whoever the God of the universe is, and it may not be a person, it may not be a being, they may be talking about being itself, but whatever that is, it's got to be universal. So it's not going to be comfortable within our culture. It calls us to be greater than our culture. It has to. And then it says, Isaiah says to the people of his nation, behold, I do something new. This is God speaking. No longer consider the former things. He tells the story about the Egyptians dying and says, but let's not dwell on the past. Isn't that interesting? Jesus does the same thing with Christianity. Right? He's saying, this is the vessel that I'm going to teach the lesson, but it's everybody. It includes everybody. Do you know if you're a person of color in Georgetown and you go to the courthouse, there's a Confederate statue waiting there for you? Now, how is that possible? It's because people are holding on to the past. If our definition comes from a history, particularly a history that's basically propaganda, a story told from white old men. Now that works for me. Old white, you know. But there's some of you, yeah, I got the old down. But see, I want it to work for all of us. And so I want a religion that makes me uncomfortable in my selfishness, and in my self-serving. I need something that frees me from selfishness. But we have to realize that what we're witnessing is people whose worldview doesn't work anymore. Yes, there's racists and haters and sexists and all that kind of stuff. But what is debilitating this nation is people who don't have the tools to go through the transformation that's necessary. They've been taught a Christianity that is so immature that it can't face off to science. It's so narrow and shallow, it can't take in people who weren't already written down in the book. I ran across a poet that put this grief in words. It's both personal and it's political. The poet says, the things that are lost in our lives are the hardest things to forget. Those things that we've lost forever embed themselves in our muscle memory. The hug of a grandma that we can never give again. Or giggles of a child we hear faintly when we close our eyes. Or the wise words of unwavering support of a dead friendship. Memory lies within our bodies, even when we wish to forget with our minds. So that's the personal presentation of the grief this entire nation is doing. Because capitalism is dying. So I've got the capitalism part out of it. You can relax. Always have to mention capitalism once. Because that's the religion of America. I don't believe in demons, but capitalism is demonic. Empire is demonic. The American empire is evil. It may have our flag on it, but it could have any insignia from any monsters from the past. And religion has to call us out of that. And the one temple that God has ever built on the planet Earth is nature. And so every other temple must calibrate to the natural world or lead people astray. I've kind of gone off on a spell here, so. Alexander Graham Bell, when you're an inventor, you have a lot of failure, a lot of failure. He said this, when one door closes, another opens. But we often look so long and so regretfully upon the closed door that we do not see the one which is open for us. The great religions of the world symbolize life. They talk about afterlife, heaven, hell, reincarnation, all of that stuff. But nobody knows about that. What it's tuning us to is the life process. Whatever eternity means has already started, so we have to find it here and now. And the hope that we're looking for is in calibrating ourselves to life, because life is change. When we're comfortable, we hate that. But when all is dying around us, that's where the hope is found. Because as long as things are eternally changing, then there's always new possibilities. In the ancient world, they talked about metamorphosis. Ovid had a great poem where he talked about life as this shape-shifting energy. And each one of us is an expression of it. But our form is not final. Now, to me, as I get older, that's better and better news, right? I mean, when you're young and Adonis and all that kind of stuff, what's female for Adonis? I don't know. What's that? Venus? Venus, that's a good one. Then that seems like it's going to be permanent. But we live in the river of life. We belong to the river of life. Our hope is in the fact that things are impermanent, as hard as that is for us. One of the great expressions of this unconquerable life is the phoenix. This is one I'm quoting a lot of poets today. Here in this suffering, all previous beliefs are called into question. They are consumed in the fire sparked and fueled by our own illusion. The pain becomes consumed in the fire sparked and... Oh, no, I already did that. They are consumed by the fire sparked and fueled by our illusion. The pain becomes the ashes we are now entombed in. It is only when we find ourselves at this most imprisoned of junctures that we emerge again, the phoenix of our very life, which is ever so much more beautiful than the last one. We're changing, we're morphing. And that's where our hope is. But when it's happening, when all things are being made new and we're holding on to the past, and that's who we think we are, it's a time of great grief and great pain. In Christianity, there's the image of being born again. And what they don't tell you is you're not going to know what that is if you've never felt dead inside. If you've gone from one distraction to another. Every great religion says impermanence is our home. So when we feel that we're in times like this, when we look for courage and there is no courage, and then we realize, okay, we're the ones that need to make that happen. We're the ones called to learn and teach courage. We're the ones that are called to learn and teach wisdom. I love the saying of the revolutionary. I've seen it on posters since then. But there's a revolutionary who is going to die. But he lived so much in the revolution that he transcended his own personal death. And he says, they think they're going to bury us. They don't know that we are seeds. When we give ourselves fully to life, to our love, to our interconnectedness, to all being, even our death is a seed, a gift for the future. Paul Tillich lived through the German atrocities. In fact, a lot of the early, in the 50s, the Protestant theologians were people who had seen what happened in Germany and realized, okay, that Christianity needs to die. Whatever Christianity cooperated with that has to die. And so he said, Christianity is not about a religion. That's not what we have to share. What we have to share, he said, is the new being. And Jesus didn't invent that, right? It's here. Buddha's talking about it. You see it all over the world. It's to realize all things are impermanent, but you belong to that which transcends, which wasn't born with you and doesn't die with you. There was another poet that said, I'm coming to the end. If alarm clocks are going off, it's... if you did a pot roast, sorry, it's going to... But it said that if life is like a tape recorder, if you think of life as like a tape recorder, it has no reverse to get back to what you've lost. Can you let go of that? Can you let go of that thing that is wounding you so much? Of holding on to something from the past, instead of the essence of that experience that is still with you. It says it has no fast forward to get out of the problems that you're in right now. So the poet said the only option you have is to push the play button, which means to join the dance, to come fully into life in the here and now, to be that kind of phoenix. 2 more quotes and we're done. And once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through. how you manage to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. And that's what this storm is all about. And just as the phoenix rose from the ashes, you too will rise, returning from the flames, clothed in nothing but your strength, more beautiful than ever before. And finally this, Richard Bach. Here's the test to find out whether your mission on earth is finished. If you're alive, it isn't. I leave you with your reflections on these words.